Hello, friends. Welcome to the Forge for August 2022. My name is Phil Hull, and I am the Director of Mission and Spiritual Development for the Indiana Division. I am also the one who is lucky enough to oversee the Forge. Our topic for this month is work. Now, if you're a student or currently working part time or full time, or if you aren't working at all, work is still an important part of our society and it's an important part of our lives. And for our purposes this month, I want to expand our view of what work is while we're having our discussion. For many of us, our view of work is our jobs and our career. It's where we go every week and we earn a paycheck. And while this is true for many of us, there are those who work hard at other things that maybe you don't receive a paycheck. Maybe you have worked hard all your life and you're finally enjoying a well earned retirement. But you still have to find things to do to stay busy during the day. Or maybe you're a full time student and you're working some side gigs with DoorDash or Uber just to make some extra money during the school year. Or maybe you're a stay at home dad who's working hard to take care of your home and of your kids. So, work can be our regular job, it can be a side hustle, volunteering, taking care of your home, or any number of other circumstances and situations. But whatever form our work takes, it's important to come at it from a place where we see it as something we do to honor and glorify God. Now, I am very fortunate to have spent the past 11 years working for the Salvation Army, and I find my work very challenging and fulfilling. It's also pretty easy to keep my focus on working to honor God because so much of what I do is trying to help people to come to know God and to grow in their faith to be more like Him. But I haven't always worked for the Salvation Army. I did spend many years working in the business world, including working for a couple of Fortune 500 companies, a major worldwide logistics company, and I also worked for one of the largest and most prestigious universities in the world. Now, those jobs were not the places that I wanted to be, but at the time, it was a job and a paycheck, and I was just happy to not be unemployed. I was also young and pretty dumb, so I didn't really take an approach to work that was very responsible or mature. During college, I had worked a couple of jobs that didn't really require me to work all that hard, so I hadn't developed a really great work ethic. I thought I was pretty clever and I could just get by doing the minimum and then cutting corners wherever possible to do the least amount of work. But by my mid 20s, I'd been fired from a couple of jobs and I had quit a couple more, probably before they had the chance to fire me. And I couldn't understand why companies wouldn't hire me after looking at my resume filled with 3 to 6 month stints at a number of different jobs over the course of several years. I had to experience quite a bit of hardship and heartache before I figured some things out when it came to work. I needed to grow up emotionally and spiritually, and I needed to really understand who it was that I was working for. It wasn't just a paycheck or even a career. My work needed to be a reflection of my love and commitment to God in that area of my life. It wasn't until I realized that I was working for God and not some faceless corporation that my whole perspective on work changed. I began to really do my best work instead of trying to get by doing the minimum. And as my approach to work changed, I also started to see my success at work change. I was easier to work with because I tried to come up with solutions instead of excuses. I was given more responsibility because I demonstrated that I could be trusted. And after years of working jobs, just waiting for God to open up an opportunity to serve Him in ministry, He gave me an opportunity with the Army that started me down the path to where I am right now. In Colossians chapter 3, the Apostle Paul spends the entire chapter contrasting the things we need to put off from our old lives and the things we need to put on now that we have a new life in Christ. He writes about how we live and the choices that we make. He writes about how this new life should change marriage relationships. He writes about how this new life should change the relationship between parents and children. And finally, he gets to the relationship between servants and masters. So here's what Paul wrote, starting in verse 22. Slaves, obey your earthly masters in everything you do. Try to please them all the time, not just when they are watching you. Serve them sincerely because of your reverent fear of the Lord. Work willingly at whatever you do, as though you were working for the Lord rather than for people. Remember that the Lord will give you an inheritance as your reward, and that the master you are serving is Christ. But if you do what is wrong, you will be paid back for the wrong you have done, for God has no favorites. Now, we can't gloss over that this passage was written to both slaves and slave masters during the Roman Empire. And this dynamic went beyond just a relationship between an employer and an employee. Slaves were property, and they faced all kinds of harsh and brutal treatment by their masters. So what incentive would there be to go above and beyond in their work? And why is it the slave's responsibility to please the slave master? It's because their hearts had been transformed by the power of God, and their service was to him. By truly serving their masters from the heart and showing them the kind of attitude that was likely not reciprocated, the slaves were showing the power of God's new life working in them. And if those slaves cannot just endure, but thrive in that circumstance, imagine how that would have looked to everyone else around them. Now, hopefully you get to work alongside good people who make your job easier. But even if your boss is the worst and treats you terribly, it is your responsibility to work diligently, because your work is ultimately serving God and his kingdom. And again, this attitude and approach is not limited to your job or your career. Whatever it is that you're putting your time and energy into, do it as another way of serving God. If you volunteer at your kids' club or sports team, go in there and show them the love and the hope that you've experienced through Jesus. If you handle things at home, show your family the peace and faithfulness of God by how you serve them. I just want to add a couple of additional thoughts as we close this introduction time. First, God promises that our work in service to Christ today will result in an eternal inheritance from God. But the reverse is also true. If we do what is wrong or self-serving, we will have to face the consequences of our actions when we stand before him someday. Lastly, I want to end by talking about chapter 4, verse 1. Paul includes an admonition for masters as well. And here's what he says. Masters, be just and fair to your slaves. Remember that you also have a master in heaven. Note here that Paul isn't saying to just be kind or pleasant to their slaves, but to treat them fairly and demonstrate justice. Now, this practice was intended to undermine the whole system of slavery, where slaves were never treated justly. So if you are in a position of leadership, if you're a supervisor of employees who work under you, it is a demonstration of your new life in Christ when you treat those who work for you as God has treated you. Give them what they ought to have and treat them as important and valuable. Your leadership is a witness to them of the grace and faith that you have already received from God. My challenge to you this month is to approach your work, whatever form it may take, as an act of obedience and service to God. Do it consciously at the start of each day and dedicate whatever you'll face that day to Him. Just remember these words of the great Salvation Army hymn. All my work is for the Master. He is all my heart's desire. Oh, that He may count me faithful in the day that tries by fire. God bless you.